Hey everyone, this is Joe Turner with the City Manager Unfiltered podcast. If you're like most ICMA members, most city managers out there, you probably have no clue what the process is to get elected to the ICMA executive board. What if I told you that that process was rigged? What if I told you that that process was manipulated and designed to perpetuate the status quo? What if I told you that the ICMA establishment handpicked the nominee that you vote for and that the process is set up so that you only have one option? That there isn't a competitive race, that you as an ICMA member do not have a choice between candidates when you're voting each year. That is the reality. And that's what you're going to learn in this interview with Graham Mitchell, the El Cajon, California city manager who attempted to become an ICMA executive board member this year. He, like many of you, mistakenly thought that you could just sort of put your name on the ballot, you go through an election process, and the members of the ICMA vote on the best candidate. But that's not how it works. That's not how it works at all. And I think many of you are going to be really shocked and surprised to learn how this process truly works. And hopefully many of you start asking some hard questions of ICMA leadership. Because if you want to start having fair, competitive elections, the process needs to change. And in this interview, Graham Mitchell is going to talk about how he wants to help reform this nomination process and create more competitive elections. Now, before we get to that interview, I want to update you on the American Association of Municipal Executives, that is the AAME. Since our May 1st announcement about the American Association of Municipal Executives, we've had great support, great feedback publicly and privately from those who are interested in joining. This is a once-in-a-lifetime historic opportunity for you as a public sector executive to get in on the ground floor of the only organization, the only association for professional managers that is out there fighting for you, fighting for your needs, your wants, your interests, and we're really excited about the future. So if you are a public sector executive and you want to join an organization that is all about creating community, creating connectedness, bringing us together as professionals to help support and champion one another, if you want to join an organization that's going to help with your personal and professional development, and if you want to join an organization that's going to protect public sector executives from having their reputations tarnished and their careers damaged by elected officials who behave unprofessionally, unethically, and sometimes illegally, then join the American Association of Municipal Executives. Go to aame.org today and become a founding member. If you have already signed up at aame.org and you've not received an email from me, make sure you check your spam folders. If you have checked your spam folder and you do not see an email from me, do one of the three following things. Send me an email at citymanagerunfiltered@gmail.com, or send me a text message or call me at 316-880-9886. That's 316-880-9886. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. I appreciate your support. Here's the interview with Graham Mitchell. All right. I'm Joe Turner, and this is the City Manager Unfiltered podcast, a podcast for city managers and other public sector executives. It is the most influential local government podcast in America. And we're going to be talking about the ICMA election process for the executive board. With me today is Graham Mitchell. He is the city manager for El Cajon, California. He went through the process recently. He has some interesting experiences and thoughts he'd like to share, and I have some observations on the process. And so we're going to go over that because obviously we're in the middle of election season for the ICMA executive board. I've been beating the drum on the need for some reforms and some changes within the organization, and I've had quite a few managers talk to me about their desire to change the organization from within. And one of the ways you change the organization from within is by getting involved in the process to get on the board. But if the process to get on the board is confusing or hard to understand, it's hard to get on the board to make some changes. So we're going to talk with Graham here. Graham, why don't you introduce yourself, give a little bit of a background, and we'll get into the interview.
Thanks, Joe. It's great to be with you today. In fact, I knew that this day would come at some point because you and I've been talking for a while, but I've always been intimidated because your guests are just so phenomenal. I mean, if I could do a quarter of what your other guests have done, I'll call it an accomplishment. So kudos to you and kudos to the people you've had on. You've had real quality folks. So
Thank you. I appreciate that. I've been very blessed. I've had some amazing guests, and one of the things that I was really worried about before I even started doing the podcast, Graham, was whether I was going to get city managers to come on the podcast and share some of their stories, because obviously, as you know, this profession makes individuals pretty reticent to they be that public, right, with their experiences because of the nature of our profession. So we've had some really good guests in the program, and I'm pretty sure you're going to do just fine.
Oh, I appreciate that. So I, like you said, I'm the city manager for the city of El Cajon, which is in Southern California, just right outside of San Diego. I've been here a little about 7 years now. I worked briefly in the city of Escondido, which is also in San Diego County. I worked in Lemon Grove, another community in San Diego County, and then I got my first city manager job in wow back in 2000 in a place called Farmersville, California. It's next to Visalia, which is right between Bakersfield and Fresno, that Central Valley area. So,
I think they're actually looking for a manager right now as we speak.
are they? Well,
I believe so.
all right.
I think so. If you want to go back home, I don't know.
Listen, I loved Farmersville, and in fact, you and I first engaged, started communicating on a LinkedIn post that you talked about. You know the difficulty of being a city manager in a small town. And then I think I'd commented on something, and I think you kind of like said, "Wow, I can't believe that someone from such a big city. You know, we're 100,000 people, 100,000 plus. How enormous of a job that must be." And I reminded you, I don't know if you remember this, but I reminded you that being the manager of a small town is far more difficult than being the manager of a big city. So,
I agree with you, but when it comes from, I've said this before because I've only had experience in small communities, and I talk to obviously a lot of managers from across the country, obviously a lot of small town managers, and we have the same sort of complaint or plea is like, hey, working in a small community is really tough because you have to wear a lot of hats and you have to do everything, and you don't have a lot of the support that a lot of the big city managers do. But it always sounds better when a big city manager says that, because I think they kind of take it with a grain of salt when small town managers complain about their plight. But yeah, it's tough being in a small community. It's tough.
yeah, it is. I mean, I can tell you right now, when I was in Farmersville, me and the police chief would take turns being the dispatcher. We had one dispatcher, and when she went to lunch, someone had to run the 911 calls, and so we would go back and forth between me and him. My dispatchers would never allow me even in the room today. So
How amazing is that? 20 years ago, you're such a small community, you got to be a dispatcher, and now you're in a community of 100,000. And for those who are aspiring or young in their career, it's pretty amazing what kind of jumps you can make in this profession if you get a nice track record, you get some accomplishment under your belt, and sky's the limit, right? Sky's the limit. So
yeah, and you have to take risks, right? I mean,
absolutely.
I became a city manager at age 30. In retrospect, I don't know if that was a good idea when you start adding up how many council meetings I will have attended by the time I retire. But, I applied knowing I was not qualified, but I applied anyway. And we won't go into all the circumstances, but I got the job for some weird circumstances that occurred. And it's been an amazing career. I've loved it. So every minute.
Awesome, awesome. We've been connected for quite a while now, and you've been one of the more vocal, I guess, individuals when it comes to, I don't want to say necessarily co-signing everything I say, but obviously you've made some public comments recently about your experiences with the profession and sort of ICMA and the Professional Management Association, so forth and so on. And I appreciate you being out there because not a lot of individuals have been. But we go back quite a ways now on this LinkedIn journey that I've been on, and I just want to thank you again for being one of those individuals. You reached out to me quite a while ago, and we really, I think our relationship really started kind of forming in a more earnest capacity in September, October of 2023, which is when I started really beating the drum on James Freed during the conference, the annual conference that the ICMA was having in Austin. And that's when a lot of my listenership was skyrocketing. And I recall us having a conversation where you were saying to me, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so you can correct me to be fair, but we were connecting because you were echoing some of the concerns that you had, or you were validating some of the concerns as I was expressing about ICMA and the profession. But you had this desire to work from within and try to make these changes from within because you believe in the organization. You're very passionate about being a city manager, public service. And we started having some conversations where you were saying, hey, I'm going to run for the executive board to be on the ICMA board. Why don't you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, I didn't. I'll admit I was kind of maybe fat, dumb, and happy, just kind of going along. Credentialed city manager, all in with ICMA, and it happened when I was at the Portland conference, and there was one of the speakers was speaking, and I just started hearing moans and groans from tables behind me, and I started kind of cueing in that is ICMA going in the direction that the city managers, core members wanted to go in? And that became a concern to me. So I started just paying more attention to the direction. And I kept finding myself like, I don't know if I like that position, or if I don't know if I like that, or the theme of this conference seems to be heavy one way or the other, and it feels like we've moved away from sort of core elements of what city management's about, and we're talking about all these things on the outside of what we do as a core profession. And and then COVID hit, and I think we really lost track of where we were really going as an organization during COVID, and saw a lot of contention between city managers of whether to stay open or stay closed. And I'll be honest, I don't think we as an organization have recovered, or even as a profession have recovered from COVID. I think there was just so many different opinions and sort of vilification of either side. So anyway, I just started paying attention more to what was happening in the organization, in its membership, and where was the organization fulfilling the needs of the membership. And so that was kind of my first inkling that, hey, maybe I do need to do something, or at least I want to be vocal about it. And then as a professional, I've wanted to engage. I get a lot of enjoyment out of engagement, and whether it's engaging with my own staff or with my community, I recognize the area of engagement that I lacked was with my peers or with other professionals. And I get along really well with the city managers in San Diego County, but outside of the county, I don't really have a lot of engagement. And I started watching some of the stuff that you were doing, and some of the links or the posts that you were making, and some of the podcasts. I started engaging with your guests and other people that were commenting, and become friends with some of those folks, right? And so I I started looking, well, what does ICMA offer in terms of engagement? Well, they have social media pages. If you look at their social media responses, it's anemic. I have
It's a ghost town. It's Tumbleweed City. Yeah.
Yeah, I have like less than 2,000 connections, and I have like quadruple the amount of engagement that ICMA gets on their posts on LinkedIn. And I know not everyone's on LinkedIn. And recently I was looking at, ICMA has a listserv program. So I looked at the last 50. I have two of the questions on that. More than half of the questions on the listserv have never been responded to. Like, people just don't care. And I thought, there's no way that this profession, people that are dedicated to public service, don't care about their fellow colleagues. And the organization is really meant to bring those people together, and
Correct.
and frankly is failing to do that. And so I said, I have time. I don't have time. I have a desire to get engaged. I'm kind of at a point in my career. I'm near the end of it. And so I have some opportunity. I have a lot of experience. I thought maybe I can help with the direction. I can help with the engagement. I can help with the areas where I see ICMA not stepping in when I think they should be stepping in to protect the council manager form of government. I don't think they're tackling some of the big issues, like sort of this politicalization of our profession. And at the end of the day, uh, I really felt that, how do I say this? I really felt that there just needed to be a different voice in the room. And it felt like everybody in the leadership kind of had the same voice,
Drinking the same Kool Aid, right?
drinking the same Kool-Aid. And when you do that, now all of a sudden the staff of ICMA, and by the way, I've had great experience in working with their staff on a lot of different occasions, but there's no direction to their staff, and there's no transparency. And we could talk a long time about their or the lack of the annual report, and maybe the joke that it is. I know if I presented a similar annual report to my community, I probably wouldn't be a city manager for very long. And so these are the things that I thought we could hold some people accountable. We could change some of the direction. We can encourage engagement. And I think that's what our membership craves, but I don't see it happening out of the current board.
Right, right. And that's what led you to want to run for the executive board, right?
That's
This is when
correct.
we go back to our conversation we had in roughly October. I forget exactly when it was, but you and I were having a conversation, Graham, and you said, "Joe, I'm trying to learn more about this process because I've never really been that plugged in as far as the nuts and bolts of it." And all this time, I thought that the reason why I only could vote for one person on the ballot was because it was just apathy and no one was involved. And then you found out, no, actually what happens is that the ICMA handpicks the nominee that you guys all vote on at every election cycle, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I feel like we're voting for Brezhnev in the USSR when that's the only choice we have.
Well, and I didn't know anything about the process until you informed me about it. Other than I started hearing some rumblings around that same time. Around October, a lot of my network obviously expanded quite a bit as far as people wanting to feed me information about it. So let's go through this whole process then. You talked about a lot of stuff in a minute ago, but let's stick to the, and I want to come back to it, believe me, because there's a lot to unpack there with what you just talked about. And I want to come back to the whole COVID situation. I want to talk about obviously the annual report and just all the community engagement issues that we've been talking about as far as connecting. There's a lot of people who listen to this podcast who have told me that they've reached out to guests of the podcast and formed relationships. Daniel Rosemont and Kevin Richardson, for example. I mean, I get all these fantastic stories, and that's really what it's all about here. I've been talking about this since day one. Let's build a community for city and county managers. But so let's walk us through this process. So you decide you want to get involved and be on the executive board. And here's the thing. I say a lot of things that are critical about the ICMA, and I am very critical about the ICMA, and I'm not the biggest fan of the ICMA. I've never been a member of the ICMA, and I have a lot of heartburn about the issues and directions that the organization's going. So I'm going to be very clear about that. Make no bones about it. But at the end of the day, if the ICMA can improve and become a better organization, even in spite of what I'm doing with AAME, which you've also become a founding member of, I'm very glad to have you aboard. I think competition is great. And if we can help make ICMA better, then that's great. I'm all for it. So why don't we talk a little bit about your whole process of getting involved on the executive board? And so those people who are listening to say, hey, you know what, next year I might want to get involved and help make a difference.
And that's Joe. That's why I wanted to come on today. Really, is to talk about that experience. 'Cause I don't think many people realize what the process looks like until after the fact, or they see the one person on the ballot and just assume everyone's empathetic. As you said, as I talked about wanting to run, I reached out to ICMA. I sent an email to the headquarters, and within a day or two, I received a call from our regional director. So she walked me through the process. She let me know when the due dates were, and very helpful. Really appreciated that. So just so you know, there's an application that you have to fill out, not a fill out, but information you need to provide. You have to provide a statement of qualifications, thorough resume, contributions that you've made to the organization of ICMA or your state organization, and then a letter of recommendation. It's not required, but it's something that is encouraged. So I got a recommendation from the Municipal Management Association of Southern California. So I submitted that on January 11th, a day before the deadline. January 12th was the deadline. And I also found out that if there is a process by which any ICMA member that's in good standing can actually apply to be on the board, and that's through a very low barrier of receiving nominations from 15 individuals. So you get a petition, have 15 individuals sign it. But as I talked to folks in that had gone through the process or were in the process, that they know the process, they were kind of discouraging me from doing that because it would almost look like I was trying to subvert the process that it existed. And so I thought, oh, I'm just going to hold off. And I'm assuming that I'll probably find out right away whether I'm nominated or not. And I'll have an opportunity to go out and get those signatures. And I was naive. I didn't realize that the signatures were due the day that applications are actually due. So you're almost like saying to the nominating committee, hey, I'm going to submit these names, or ICMA, I'm going to submit these names because I don't think you're going to nominate me. And I'm going to try to throw fly in this ointment that you have going on.
Right. At the same time that you're getting the impression that if you do that, you're sort of being, I don't want to say the bad guy, but you're being the cantankerous, maybe disruptor if you go that route, right?
Correct.
But then if you
Correct.
don't do it, it's too late.
It's too late. And now I've learned later, I mean, at least in the literature from ICMA, that the nominating committee isn't forwarded the names of those that submitted, but it doesn't say anywhere that they're not informed that you actually have names submitted. So, I mean, if anything, I'd rather have the nomination. But so at the end of the day, I kind of waited. I submitted my application in mid-January. I waited. I waited. March 25th, I found out I had an interview. So that's cool. And found out that there'd be a few other people being interviewed by the committee of 10. And my interview was on April 4th. And then I think either later that day or the next day, I found out that I was not nominated by the committee, which is okay.
Well, I don't know. We'll see. Well, we can unpack that. You're gonna say it's okay. I'm gonna push back a little bit here on this. So Graham, you said that there were a couple other people involved in the process that are being considered for a couple other nominees, but did you know that going in, or how did you know there were other nominees? Because were you informed that by the ICMA, or because I one of the things I get really kind of frustrated about with the ICMA is the opaqueness to the process, the lack of transparency, and I've had conversations with other individuals who say that they had no idea who the other nominees were when it came to who you're competing with and who you're competing against for the spot. Did you know who those nominees were?
I did know who they were, but it wasn't through the ICMA. When I applied or I requested a letter of endorsement from MMASC, they actually responded and let me know that they also provided letters to two other individuals. So I knew that I had applied and those two other individuals had applied as well. So I knew that at least three of us applied to be on this committee.
Got you. So did you know who they were? Did they give you the names of the people that they endorsed?
Yes.
Okay. So you knew at a minimum there was at least two other people, but you don't know if there were four or five or six other people
There
running
could
the
have been
process.
more people interviewed that day for all I
And
know.
and to this day you don't know, correct?
Do not know.
Okay. So here's a problem I have with the election process because at the end of the day, the ICMA creates a regional nominating committee that handles this process where they're supposed to vet all these candidates, which again, I have an issue and we can unpack that a little bit more. But the regional nominating committee, how do you hold a committee accountable for the people that they're selecting? And they're only get to pick one for each region. How do you get to hold them accountable if nobody even knows what the pool of candidates were that they're selecting from?
Great question.
I mean, the whole point, and I mean, again, in American democracy, the idea is that the people are the ones that elect the representatives, right? They get to basically choose from the field of candidates that they want to represent them. They vote on those candidates, and then it's all out in the open for everyone to see. But here in the ICMA, you have candidates who you do not know who they are, you don't know how many there are, and they go and they sit before a panel of individuals that nobody really even knows who those panelists are. I think we're going to talk about that in a second. And so, how is it that an organization that preaches transparency and accountability and trust? I mean, I see this on a weekly basis on their LinkedIn posts that get no engagement. In fact, they have one this week. They've had two posts this week on transparency and community trust building, and yet nobody in the organization even knows who the candidates are. I don't know. It just boggles my mind, Graham.
Yeah.
So what about these what about this panel? Did you know who these panelists were before you were going to basically be seated for this interview process?
So the day before the interview, I was sent an email that included the 10 questions that would be asked of me, which
Okay.
I appreciated that. It gave me a
Okay.
chance to really mull over ideas and make my statements. And I was also given a list of those that would be not only on the interview panel, and there's 10 of them invited. Not all 10 were able to make it. And then there was about six individuals that were observers, all ICMA affiliates.
Okay. So you had a total of, I guess, possible 16 people in the room, 10
Correct.
panelists, and you had some observers. Okay.
Yes.
Let's unpack this for a little bit. So you don't know who they are until the day before. Okay.
Correct.
I've come across something called, I guess, the various rotation agreements for the different regions, and I got the Midwest agreement in front of me, and it listed different organizations that are going to be on the panel. I don't know if this is for every region or if it's only for the Midwest one, but I'll give you an example. It says that the regional nominating committees are going to be comprised of each president of the state associations, and then the representative of each of the following organizations would be included. That's the I think it's the National Federation for Black Public Administrators, NFBPA. You have LGHN, which is I think the local government Hispanic network. Then you have League of Women in Government, and then NACA, the National Association of County Administrators. And then you'd also have the ICMA president or his designee as sitting on the committee. So the number of people sitting on these committees, these regional committees, is going to vary depending on the number of state associations, I believe. And that's the only thing that would impact that. Does that sound about right to you?
It sounds like we have the exact same scenario in the West Coast as the Midwest.
Okay. And but in the Midwest agreement, it says that each of these national affiliate organizations has the opportunity to appoint a representative in the region to the committee. One thing that I noticed in there that bothered me is it doesn't say that those organizations must have a city manager or an assistant city manager as a representative. I don't know if that's implied or not. I don't know how these organizations are comprised, but that's something that kind of bothered me. Do you know anything about your organizations as far as whether or not they were assistant city managers or city managers that were on the panel?
I can't recall everybody's title, but it was, as I recall, it was mostly city managers or assistant city managers. There may have been like a city clerk or something. I don't, maybe not, but everyone had a pretty elevated title. Put it that
Okay.
way.
It's the reason why I bring this up, Graham, is I had a city manager in a different region complained to me that their panelists was comprised predominantly of individuals who are not city or city managers, and that they were pretty kind of frustrated by that. But I don't have the data. I don't have a list. Again, this is a very opaque process. To my knowledge, the ICMA is not putting out a list of all the candidates or a list of all these panelists, which is something I think they should be doing. But that's just something that an observation that I had. So as you go through this process, you mentioned that there's observers, and these observers in our pre-interview talk, you said all these observers were basically ICMA affiliated individuals as far as staffers or exec board members and things of that sort of nature, right?
Correct.
Now, do we know if these observers have any impact or influence on the deliberations between the members of the nominating panel when they're going through and reviewing each of the individuals who are interviewing for the position?
I don't know. Like after the interviews occurred, I don't know if there's a conversation that happens and whether they're part of that conversation or not. I'm assuming they don't have a vote for sure, but whether they weigh in, that I don't know.
Okay. All right. And I'm gonna put you on the spot. I don't know if you feel comfortable doing this, but do you know the two organizations that did not show up to send a representative to your interview?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't remember because the interviews through a Zoom call or a Teams call, so it's like little boxes of faces, and I was
The round robin introduction style, and then
yes,
yeah, okay, gotcha.
yeah,
I mean, obviously, I find that a little insulting that you have a couple organizations, affiliate organizations, that are supposed to be involved in the process for reviewing nominees, and they're not sending a representative if they're going to be involved in the process. That's I don't really think affiliate organizations should be involved in the process, but if you're going to be given a seat at the table, you probably should be participating, right? We talk about apathy in American politics at the local government level. I don't know, a little frustrating. So okay, so you go through this process and you get the word that you were not selected,
correct,
correct?
correct.
Now, when you look at the Midwest Agreement, it says the following: regional nominating committees will follow the ICMA Executive Board's policy to select a nominee who will provide a balanced board that represents the profession and those served by it. The committee will use the following criteria established by the board to evaluate candidates. Now, I don't know if these are listed in order of preference or hierarchy of value, but it says experience in local government, service to ICMA and its affiliates, diversity in the nominees and the continuing board members with whom they will serve in terms of race, ethnicity, gender, and age. Parentheses, it talks about acknowledging that the ICMA will continue to monitor other membership demographics such as population size, jurisdiction type, and form of government. They also talk about demonstration of ethical behavior, support for the profession via work with ICMA, state affiliate organizations, or other organizations, and then commitment to follow the election guidelines, quality or caliber for for board service, and participation in the ICMA's voluntary credentialing program, which you are a credential manager.
I am
Yep. And you have significant experience over 20 years as a city manager in the top seat, correct?
correct.
Okay. So when you were told that you were not um, going to be nominated or put on the nomination, which basically means you're not going to be selected, right? Because there's only one
Correct.
person to choose from, right?
Correct. Correct.
Did they give you an explanation for why you were not selected?
Yeah, kind of. There's a formal explanation, but I think there was an underlying explanation as well. I think the formal explanation was it wasn't my time. Encouragement to apply again.
Was it your time? It'll never be your time because I am talking to a white male. I'm just kind of curious. I'll
Well,
throw that out
I
there.
can tell you this. I've had another person approach me and say, "Hey, I had to apply 4 times." It's almost like this. We almost see it in our own political parties, right? It's almost like you've done your dues, you've put in your effort. You may not be the best candidate, but you've done what the party wanted you to do for the last 20 years. So now it's your time. I
So
kind of got that impression.
played by the establishment's rules,
Yeah,
so to speak.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
You're part of the gang. You've done what you needed to do, and so I hadn't done that yet. And so I was encouraged to apply again. And then what was interesting is the individual telling me that I didn't get the nomination. She referred to me as a disruptor. What's interesting is I had never used that word in my interview, but I was pretty blunt. I mean, I didn't hold back. I wasn't trying to um say things to engender them to like me. I was going to be exactly who I am. I was going to be 100%. This is Graham Mitchell. This is what you get, right?
Do you mind maybe summarizing kind of like what your platform was for? I mean, I imagine Graham Mitchell running for high school class president. We're gonna do longer recesses, longer lunch hours. What was the campaign pitch to get on the executive board? I'm kind of curious.
I think my campaign pitches, I come with a different perspective. And I'll give you one of the questions that was asked. Question number 8 said, how would you explain ICMA's global initiative to a member in your region? So, like, in other words, how do you explain the the all the stuff that we're spending time and money and effort on to the average Joe?
Hmm.
So my response is I can't. Like I wouldn't support it. In fact, I don't support it. And then I went in to talk about how, and by the way, I'm an international relations major. I love foreign type stuff. And so, but I said, we got to focus on problems at home right now. I think we have city managers and the council manager form of governments under attack here in the United States and in Canada. And let's focus on that first. And then we can focus on all the other stuff. So, um, interestingly though, I've had people reach out to me since this interview, and one of them told me and said, "Do you know why ICMA spends so much time on overseas stuff?" And I didn't know, of course. And again, this I don't know this for factual because
Right.
ICMA's website has no information about it. But apparently, ICMA has contracts with the State Department to do international aid kind of things, and so that's never been explained to me. If that's true, I don't know if I disagree with that. I kind of like that concept, but are we doing it at the expense of ourselves? I do know when I go to the last annual report, which is the 22 annual report, 31% of the ICMA budget comes in grants and contracts. So I
Hmm.
assume part of that 31% of the budget is State Department contracts, but maybe that explains some of the rationale for all the international stuff. Now, explain that. If that's the case, be transparent and share that information. So I thought that was cool that that came out. That information came out after the fact, after my from my interview.
Yeah, when you look on the ICMA reports, which obviously are not very well done, and they're not consistent in their format or metrics, so you can't really do year over year comparisons. Right now, we are nearly 10 and a half months into the last fiscal year. That ended at the end of June of 2023, and they still haven't put an annual report up. So the last available one is for 2022. The 2021 is a dead link; you can't even find it. I don't know where that one exists. The 2020 is a different format, different metrics. And I think that 2020 was the last one where they talk about the percentage of membership breakdown. And so the ICMA with the approximate membership of 13,000 members lists 3% of their membership as being international. So roughly 400 people in this entire organization are members from another country. I got to imagine the lion's share of that number has got to be from Canada, I would think, right? And so it's like, really, what's going on here? I'm not going to beat the drum on this podcast on that, although I think it's ridiculous, by the way, Graham, that 3 out of the 18 board spots, 1/6 of the board spots on this executive board are allocated to a population subset that represents 3% of the total membership. It's completely ridiculous. It's completely hypocritical. We see this time and time again with when it comes to talking about DEI initiatives and representation. Oh, your representation of your staffing, your police department should be reflective of your community. Okay, well, except when it doesn't fit the political narrative. Like, why would 16.7% of your executive board seats be allocated to a population that's comprised of 3% of your total membership? It makes no sense to me. I don't know.
I mean, it's not representative of our organization. So
No, no. And the other thing you talked about being a disruptor, you know, we heard time and time again that supposedly diversity is our strength, right? The diversity of thought, diversity of opinions, diversity of perspectives, but yet a disruptor obviously has a negative connotation to some people. I actually think it's a really good and positive connotation, but a disruptor is somehow persona non grata in the organization. And when I look at the Midwest agreement, the rotation agreement in section 5 of it, it says that the regional nominating committees will only consider candidates who meet the requirements and expectations of ICMA for board members. What the hell does that mean? Expectations? What does that mean, Graham?
I think it means toe the line.
I mean, it's like I guess so. I mean, the whole process is rigged and designed to let the establishment control who gets elected to it, and obviously that's going to be a pro status quo, right? It's not going to be in favoring anybody who's disruptive or wants to do something that's different or contrary to the conventional wisdom or direction of the organization. I just find that incredibly problematic.
Yep.
Man, when it comes to the election process, there could be write-in candidates, I guess. Or not write-in candidates. I guess there is a. I don't know if there's a write-in candidate or not because it's interesting, Graham. Somebody posted recently on LinkedIn. I'm going to read you a post that came across. Okay,
Okay.
this is up in Wisconsin. This is how I got the Midwest rotation agreement and why I'm talking about it a little bit. So a Galen Roden, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, is a manager in Wisconsin, and this person wrote, "For ICMA members, your voice counts, and so does your vote. Please consider write-in candidate Janesville City Manager Kevin Lahner or Lahner, I'm not sure, for ICMA Midwest VP." I don't even know if there are write-in candidates available to get in on the ballot, Graham. But before I get to that, Mark Roloff responded to Galen. He actually reshared her post, and he wrote, "This issue is about the need for ICMA to hold itself accountable to the Midwest Rotation Agreement for the selection of its VP candidates. The agreement is being ignored. The candidate on the ballot is qualified but should have never been eligible per the Midwest Rotation Agreement. Plus, Kevin is an awesome guy." Okay, so there's a couple things there. One is, do you know anything about the write-in process? Because the write-in process is different than, I assume, if it's even possible to do it, the petition process, which we talked about earlier in the interview. The way the petition process, I would think, works is that if you provide those 15 signatures and you're not nominated, your name would still be included on the ballot for a choice, for the voters to have a choice. I have never seen anything about a write-in possibility. I don't know anything about that. Do you know anything about that?
I don't, but now I'm curious, and I want to look if that's a possibility. Not for
Yeah.
me, not for me, of course, but yeah,
Well, we all know this anyway. It doesn't matter. Write-in candidates have basically a snowball's chance in hell of getting elected,
correct.
anything like that. So, but I thought that was an interesting observation. And then the other thing is the fact that the rotation agreement has been violated by the ICMAs. How is it that the ICMA can violate its own agreement with the state associations, and yet nothing really happens? I had a conversation with another manager in the last couple of days, and this person told me that this is the second time this has happened in recent memory in the Midwest. I think they said this is the second time it's happened to Wisconsin, but I'm not 100% sure about that. Um, but I mean, again, who's holding the ICMA accountable when they don't even honor their own agreements?
Yeah,
And then speaking of holding the ICMA accountable, I've talked about this before on Tenet 7. Tenet 7 talks about how ICMA members are not allowed to engage in political campaigns. They're not allowed to endorse candidates. They're not allowed to basically get involved in the political process, right?
correct.
Okay. And I've talked about how Ray Beret has been the chief of staff to Mark Ott, for example, has made campaign contributions to Democrat candidates and Democrat PACs. And there was no transparency, no accountability when it comes to that. To my knowledge, nothing has happened. How is it that the number two person in the organization who works for the CEO can do that, and yet nobody calls that person out? Nobody reprimands them publicly. There's no public statement issued. The same goes for the stuff that happened to James Freed when there was a violation of Tenet 3, when you have managers who are talking about punching him in the face, who call him a douchebag, including your colleague down there, Pamela Antil and Encinitas. There's no accountability on that front. And then you have this process, Graham, where you can run for office, run for the executive board, and the entire process is rigged or manipulated, whatever word you want to use, so that the organization itself actually endorses and recommends the specific candidate that you have to vote for. Does that seem to be hypocritical or incongruent in your opinion?
We talk about having diversity of thought in our communities all the time, right? It's if we have the same people on the city council making the same decisions, there are those that become disenfranchised. And so we spend a lot of time professionally thinking about how to hear a greater voice from our residents. I would hope that ICMA would have that same attitude, but it doesn't seem like they have as of late.
I agree. I agree. I mean, you have a situation where literally the entire process from start to finish is manipulated manipulated to promote and perpetuate the status quo and to protect the establishment. And I had a conversation within the last week with an individual. This individual said, "Joe, I appreciate what you're doing. I hope everything goes well with the AAME, the American Association of Municipal Executives. I wish you nothing but success, but I want to work from within the organization to change it." And I said, "Okay, fair enough. I hear you. I will tell you that I think that's a very naive sentiment to have, but I'm not going to bore you with my arguments or reasons why. But at the end of the day, Graham, if someone truly wants to change the organization from within, how do you change the organization from within if the entire election process is protecting the status quo and protecting the establishment from that change?"
I agree, and I am one of those individuals that has a little bit of faith that things can change, and maybe that's naive. And and I'm doing podcasts like this to help expose. I mean, agreeing to come on and talk to you, Joe, expose the flaws in the process. Me and another assistant city manager from another city in the state are meeting with three ICMA task force members, talking about some of our recommendations of how the nomination process can change. So, at least three people that have some voice in the ICMA leadership are willing to listen. Whether they'll hear, I don't know, but they're willing to entertain a meeting. But let me share two things really quickly. One, while you were talking, I did look it up. There is a way to make a write-in. You can do a write-in on the ICMA ballot. So
Okay.
green light up there. But I'll tell you the part that makes me skeptical. Having just expressed some hope that change can occur. When I was at the League of California Cities city manager conference in February, I was talking with somebody, and the individual said, "I can't be seen talking to you right now in case they're watching." I'm like,
Are you
"What?
kidding me?
Like, what are you talking about?" And it's almost like, and listen, I don't I don't want to sound like I'm paranoid and that people care about me, because I don't think they really do. But the fact that I was on a radar of someone being worried about talking to me because I'm perceived as this disruptor, and I've never been out there. I've just expressed some concerns. I've never been derogatory about an individual. Um, I'm still very supportive of ICMA. I intend on keeping my membership. I'm working on my credential, my renewal right now. So it was very bizarre when someone would feel that way. And I don't think this is a crackpot person. This is someone that I actually respect a lot. Um,
You're talking about a fellow city manager,
a
correct?
fellow city manager, yeah,
Okay. All right.
that I think also would like to see change occur within the organization, but is maybe fearful of being a voice. And I've had people reach out to me on LinkedIn privately saying, "Well, I can't believe you just said that out loud on LinkedIn. That's public, right? ICMA can read this stuff."
Yes.
And I'm like, "We don't belong to a cult. I hope that's
Do
not what
you?
we."
Are you sure?
Well, maybe that gives me the concern, the pause of maybe I'm being foolish thinking that change can occur. But I have hope, I have faith. I'm going to still press forward, and if I'm proven wrong, I'm proven wrong. But I got to at least give it a good college try.
That's just, I mean, it doesn't shock me, honestly. I don't know if it's going to shock other people who are listening to this podcast. It doesn't shock me based off the feedback I've gotten over the last year and a half. But to have another manager, right? Like, we're not talking a management analyst, we're not talking a student member. We're talking about another manager, right? Sitting in the chair. The whole idea that you're supposed to have, the ability to talk truth to power, right? All this other stuff, right? That you're supposed to be principled in your convictions and make the tough decisions. But you have another manager who will tell you that I do not want to be seen talking to you because they're fearing some sort of retaliation or retribution against them, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And so, if that's the case, and I don't want to go on a whole James Freed discussion right now, although if you want to chime in, you can. I'm not foreclosing the conversation, but I've been talking about the James Freed hit, calling it a political, partisan, personal vendetta against a manager. When you have a manager coming up to you and telling you that they're fearful of being associated in any way with you. And I can tell you that I've had vendors, I've had recruiters give me the stiff arm because of my pointed criticism of the ICMA. I've had vendors say they don't want to be blackballed. I've had recruiters who are ICMA loyalists who said that they don't want to be associated with me. I've had obviously other members who've expressed concern, so forth and so on. So when I go out there and say, hey, I think this is a personal political vendetta against a fellow city manager, and I think the code of ethics is being weaponized. How's that out in left field? How's that a crazy sentiment to have when you have a personal experience where another city manager is fearing retribution and retaliation simply for associating with you?
Yeah, that's a concern.
It's a big concern, right? I mean, so, oh man. So you talked a minute ago about some optimism and working with another manager or multiple managers and with some staff to get some changes in place for the ICMA, right?
Yes.
Because you support what the AAME is doing. You're a founding member of the AAME, but you just said a second ago that you want to continue your ICMA membership and you are still believe in the organization. You want to effectuate change from within.
Yes.
What would you like to see happen? What would you like to see? What reforms would you like to see changed or made with respect to your recent experience running for the board?
One, I'd love to see either two things happen with the nomination. One is that the committee brings the three most qualified individuals forward, so we actually have an opportunity to vote on multiple individuals. I think that's that is the least of what we should expect as members, to be able to vote in a democratic process. Or if that's not the case, at least allow for a longer period of time once the nominations have been identified. Now you have 30 days to go out and get your signatures for those that want to get signatures. Right now, the process is misaligned. The process is aligned in a way that really subverts or suppresses participation. So I'd either like to see a realignment of when that deadline is for the signatures, or just let the nominating committee bring everybody forward. Or if there's 20 amazing candidates, why not have 20 amazing candidates? And here's why I think this is important. I've looked at all the candidates on LinkedIn that are running. I've
You mean the nominees, the
the
nominees?
nominees. Sorry,
Yes.
sorry.
Yep.
Um, and one of them I've connected with, and I know that not everyone's connected on LinkedIn. I get that. It's not a big deal. But it's interesting that I have no idea where these people are. I don't know what their ambitions are. I don't know what their goals are. I mean, one of the questions that we are asked in that interview is like, what are the things that you would like to accomplish as a vice president?
Sure.
I should know that. If I'm going to vote for somebody, I should know what you're wanting to accomplish. And an election process allows some dialogue where you can actually have some conversation about that. But this one person nominated process gives no opportunity. It's like either choose this person, do a write-in which has no chance, or don't vote at all. And frankly, I've not voted at all in the last couple elections because there's only been one person. What
What's
good's
the
my
point?
vote? Yep.
What's
What's
the
the
point?
point?
And that's the thing that you kind of touched on that, and I was going to tee that one up here a little bit. Is when you have a process whereby there's only one candidate to vote for who's been handpicked or chosen, you're going to get apathy. You're going to get people who are disconnected from the process because why waste my time? The ICMA literally has a post out there on LinkedIn today, I think, or a couple of days ago, saying, "Hey, go out, go sign up and vote. Right? Go log in and vote for candidates." Why are you wasting my time telling me to go vote for candidates when I only have one option to choose from?
That's right.
It makes no sense. And the idea that you're going to vote for candidates when it's like voting for Obamacare, right? You have to vote for it before you know what's in it or something. Like how do you vote on candidates when you have no idea what it is that they stand for, what they're trying to accomplish, what they're trying to reform, if anything? You have no clue. There's no visibility. There's no transparency. And so, yeah, I mean, if you're really trying to have a process that encourages participation, you've got to give people a choice. Choice is what creates competition and which creates participation. When there's no choice, you have apathy. Graham, a second question I have for you is getting back to this idea that not only are you a disruptor or whatnot, but you support the ICMA and in terms of like wanting to reform it and change it from within. Do you have a message you want to communicate to those? Like, there's going to be people out there listening to this podcast who don't like Joe Turner, who disagree with me.
Yeah.
They have they just listen to me out of frustration or because they want to see what I'm going to say. I guess obviously I have a lot of people who do support what I'm doing. Over the last week or so, we've been people sign up for AME, and I've had a lot of people who say, "Hey, I've never been an ICMA member, don't want to be an ICMA member." I've had people say, I'm an ICMA member, but I don't plan to renew because I'm going to be part of AAME. And then I've had a lot of managers who say, you know what? Support what you're doing, Joe. I think you're raising some really good points, but I value and enjoy my membership in ICMA and I want to stick with ICMA. What do you say to those city managers out there who, one, disagree with Joe Turner and just say, "Hey, he's a loudmouth, he's a rabble rouser, he's a troublemaker, a provocateur." What do you say to them, and what do you say to the managers out there who maybe do agree with me but want to stick with the ICMA and say, "Hey, if we're going to change this organization from within, this is what we got to do." What would you say to those folks?
Well, one, if there's people that want to change the organization within, join me. I'm not saying join me as like we're gonna go storm the headquarters, but let's get involved. I think we need to get together either at conferences and see real reform. So I would like to have dialogue with you about that. But I don't see AME and ICMA as competition. I think there's opportunity for a lot of room for more engagement. I think AME and some of the things that you've talked about wanting to do is really create this environment, this community where we get together and we solve stuff and we talk about real issues, stuff that ICMA is not doing at all. This it fills this niche, this void that exists in the ICMA organization. To be honest with you, I don't know if ICMA is best suited to do that just because of the type of membership it has. As it becomes more diluted from city managers and assistant city managers, its mission has changed over the years, and so ICMA can fulfill one purpose, but I see AME fulfilling another purpose. So if you're an ICMA member and you're feeling that you're lacking a little something in the organization, join AME and get your whole plate full. That's what I'm trying to accomplish.
Yeah, sounds good. So, Graham, I support what you're doing. Like, obviously, I'm doing AME, and I agree with you 100%. I think there's a room for more than one entity in this space, right? We're focused on the city manager specifically, the city county manager, the public sector executive, how to help them as a person, as a professional, right? Whereas ICMA is committed to the council manager form of government and advocating on behalf of the profession. How would you like individuals who want to help you with your reform agenda? How would you like them to get in touch with you?
I would love to connect with folks. And I think maybe there's two ways to do it. One is just email me directly, and I'll give you my email is Graham Mitchell 10 at att.net. That's my personal email. Or find me on LinkedIn. I do a lot of my communication with with peers through LinkedIn, so that's another way to find me. Just Graham Mitchell.
Awesome. And I will link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes so that they can get in touch with you. Hey, Graham, I really appreciate you taking the time to discuss these issues with me on the podcast. Is there any other final comments you'd like to make about anything we've discussed today?
No, I just appreciate you giving a lot of passion and voice to the city management profession. It's something that I adore. I can't imagine doing anything else, and you've actually energized a lot of people. So appreciate all that you've done.
Thank you, Graham. I appreciate that. Like again, I want to reiterate one more time. It's all about trying to move the profession forward in a positive way that helps managers, from my perspective. Right. I wanted to have you on this podcast, Graham, because not only are you a strong supporter of what I'm doing, but you have this strong support for the ICMA, right? And it's like, it's tough, right? Because I put a lot of stuff out there that's critical about the ICMA. Obviously, I poke and I prod and I highlight things that I do not like. Absolutely, 100%. But I also try to give those who, I've talked about this numerous times. The community is about helping those in your network accomplish their goals and objectives, right? And it's not just about advancing my personal agenda or what I'm trying to do, right? Graham, you support me, I support you. You want to help reform ICMA from within as well. So how can I help you accomplish that? That's what I'm all about. I want to help those who are in my network, my community, accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. And if I can give you a voice and give you a platform and say, hey, it's not Joe Turner just always trying to be anti-ICMA or put out negative ICMA stuff on here. I have individuals on the podcast all the time who say things that are positive and support about the ICMA. So that's why I really wanted to have you on here, because one, I'm deeply troubled by the election process that you had to go through. I think, again, it's rigged and I have a significant problems with it. But at the same point, you want to make some of these reforms, and I think I can help give my platform to you so you can get connected with like-minded souls in the ICMA membership. So anyway, Graham, thank you very much for being on the program.
It was a pleasure. Thanks, Joe.
All right, I'm Joe Turner. This is the City Manager Unfiltered podcast. Thank you for listening. I am trying to get to 200 ratings and reviews on the Apple Podcast Network. If you listen to me on Apple and you are a fan, please go and leave a review or a rating. I'm trying to get to 200. I'm around 178, and I only got a month to go to get to that 200 mark. So please take a moment to support the podcast. And also, before I let you go, if you want to be part of the AAME and want to be a founding member of the American Association of Municipal Executives, please go to aame.org, sign up today, and get in on the ground floor, because we're going to do some historic stuff. We're going to do some pretty amazing things, and I'm really excited about the future of that organization and what we're going to do. So if you want to be a part of a community of managers who's going to support each other, you want to be a part of a community that's going to help with your personal and professional development, and you want to be a part of a community that's going to advocate on your behalf as a professional, join today. Catch you next time.